Chapter 8, Part 2a Postulates or Basic Assumptions of Abhidhamma Supporting the Kamma Phenomena. Concept or the phenomena of Kamma is not unique to Buddhism. Most religions speak about how our actions in this life will determine where we would end up in our next life. However, no other religion or philosophy provides a plausible rationale or a possible reasoning to explain how our thoughts, words, and actions could influence our futures during this life and future lives, like the Abhidhamma doctrines. Unfortunately, in my view, whether a person chooses to believe in karma phenomena has to be based on what I would call informed faith, since it is not possible to develop proof to support these phenomena using today's scientific methods. With that in mind, I have written this chapter for the skeptic, that is, a person who doubts about Abhidhamma phenomena but is willing to explore it with an open mind. This chapter focuses on the postulate or the basic assumptions of Abhidhamma. Next chapter, or chapter 8, part 2, will focus on hypotheses. According to the Buddhist doctrine, our actions, physical, verbal, or mental, could result in consequences within this lifetime or during a future life. In this chapter, I describe how I have understood the phenomenon of karma as described in Abhidhamma using the postulates or the basic assumptions of Abhidhamma. I want to be very clear about the objective of this chapter. I want, I want to use the postulates of Abhidhamma and present to a person with an open mind a hypothesis that the phenomenon of karma is a strong possibility. That is, I have no intention to prove the phenomenon of karma using current day scientific methods with absolute certainty. Since I was blessed to be born in a family with very strong affiliations to Buddhism, from my childhood I had developed a habit of comparing what I learned in science to what I was learning about Buddhism. So I began wondering about the similarity between the phenomenon of karma and Newton's third law of motion in early 1970s when I did not know anything at all about Abhidhamma. Just to refresh for those who may have forgotten, Newton's third law of motion states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This means when one object exerts a force on a second object, the second object simultaneously exerts a force of equal magnitude in the opposite directions on the first object. I think I was in grade 9 or 10, living at my uncle and aunt's place in Vajra Road, Colombo, when I learned Newton's laws. By the way, I still think of them frequently because these two took care of me like one of their own while I was studying at Royal College. Anyway, I used to wonder, why would this law not apply to phenomenon that I cannot touch, feel, or smell? But what is the thing that could create the opposing force for things that I cannot touch, feel, or smell? Several decades later, as I learned Abhidhamma, I came to know plausible or possible answers to these questions. One of the significant challenges that I faced when learning about the Kamma phenomenon is related to the terminology. The term Kamma is used to mean very different things in different places. Some use the term Kamma or karma to refer to the consequences of our past actions. Others use the term Kamma or karma to refer to the actions of a person that create consequences or Vipaka. In this chapter, I will be using two terms consistently to discuss the Kamma phenomena. These two terms are volitional forces or chetana and resultants or vipakachittas. Volitional forces or chetanas is the force created when we have unwholesome or bad or beautiful or good chittas or moments of consciousness. Resultant or vipaka chittas are chittas or moments of consciousness that occur in our minds due to past chetana or past volitional forces. Please read these several times before you go further. There are two words I use in this chapter whose meaning is very important. So let me repeat them a couple of times. The first is, what is a postulate? A postulate is a statement that is accepted as true without proof, often used as a basis for an argument or a system of reasoning. It can also be defined as a basic principle or a fundamental assumption in a particular field, like mathematics or philosophy. Again, a postulate is a statement that is accepted as true without proof, often as a basis for an argument or a system of reasoning. It can also be defined as a basic principle or a fundamental assumption in a particular field like mathematics or philosophy. On the contrary, a hypothesis is a proposed explanation or an assumption made for the purpose of further investigation, testing, or argument. It's an idea that is not yet proven but is used to make predictions that can be tested against evidence. It is an educated guess of a possibility. Even though the purpose of this chapter is to discuss the postulates or the basic assumptions of Abhidhamma, such as chittas and chetasikas, I want to introduce the hypotheses of Kamma phenomena here. First, the action. The unwholesome or beautiful moments of consciousness or chittas generate volitional forces. This is somewhat equivalent to the action in Newton's law. These volitional forces act on the ether of the universe. Ether of the universe is a term I invented to present the hypothesis. I will provide more details of what that means in the next chapter. To continue, when the volitional forces act on the ether of the universe, they create opposite reactions which are commensurate or equal in magnitudes to the volitional forces. One type of such reactions is chittas that occur in the stream of consciousness of the person who committed the action. These are called resultant chittas. These resultant chittas are neither good nor bad, but they can change the trajectory or the path of our present life or our future life. The next slide shows a figure that illustrates this hypothesis. It will be discussed in details in the next chapter. Please observe this figure for about 30 seconds. Our consciousness consists of a series of chittas or moments of consciousness that appear, last for some time, and then extinguish or ceases to exist. These chittas appear and extinguish extremely rapidly. The lifespan of a chitta or a moment of consciousness is extremely short. To convey how short it is been stated in Abhidhamma that during the time it takes to blink an eye, millions of chittas rise and distinguish or dissipate. Each chitta or a moment of consciousness consists of large number of chetasikas or mental factors. If you think of chitta is a bucket, you can think of chetasikas as the balls in the bucket of varying colors. Abhidhamma described 52 different types of chetasikas. You can think of them as 52 different color balls. Each chitta or a bucket does not contain all 52 chetasikas. It only contains a subset of them. Each bucket or chitta may contain 50 to 40 of these different balls or different colors or different chetasikas. Because chittas and chetasikas are very important to understand the phenomena of karma, I will repeat the relationship with the analogy of a light bulb as I did in chapter 5. I'm a light bulb with 52 colors. I light up and shuts down millions of times a second. My color changes depending on which subset of my 52 filaments heat up. I am a moment of your consciousness or a chitta. My filaments are the 52 different mental factors or chetasikas that determines my color during that fraction of the second that I last. I can assume 121 different colors depending on which of the 52 of my filaments energize. That is, my consciousness can have 121 different types of chittas. The nature of each chitta, good, bad, or neutral, depends on the subset of chetasikas in that chitta. Think of it as all small balls in the bucket combining and creating one big bowl. Unwholesome or bad chetasikas combine with universal or neutral chetasikas and create an unwholesome or a bad chitta. I have picked brown color to depict or show bad chetasikas and chittas. Similarly, beautiful or good chetasikas or mental factors combine with universal or neutral chetasikas and create a beautiful or a good chitta. I have picked green color to depict or show beautiful chittas and chetasikas. Then there are chittas that are neither good or nor bad. These do not have any bad chetasikas such as hatred or beautiful chetasikas such as compassion. I use the blue color to show chetasikas and chittas that are neither beautiful nor unwholesome. Here's a summary of the relationship between chittas and chetasikas explained more accurately, but maybe using harder to understand words. Each chitta or a moment of consciousness constitutes or contains a number of chetasikas or mental factors that characterizes its nature, good, bad, or neutral. Chittas or moments of consciousness and chetasikas are like the king and the army. One doesn't exist without the other. Chittas never rise alone, they always rise together with the associated chetasikas. The nature of individual chittas depending on its constituent chetasikas. Abhidhamma postulates to each chitta or moment of consciousness constitutes or contains a number of chetasikas or mental factors that characterize its attributes or its nature, whether it's good, bad, or neutral. Chittas and chetasikas are like the king and the army. One doesn't exist without the other. Chittas never rise alone. They always rise together with the associated chetasikas. The nature of the individual chittas depend on its constituents, chetasikas or the mental factor. Now I will give a little more details about the type of chitta or a moment of consciousness that occurs in the mind of a man who's mad and jealous. This is an example of one of millions or hundreds of millions of chittas in the stream of consciousness of an angry man. Now I will describe one of the millions of chittas that is happening in this man's mind due to jealousy and hatred. This chitta contains all four chetasikas or mental factors: delusion, shamelessness, restlessness, and fearlessness of doing wrong, which are present in every bad or unwholesome chitta. They are shown in light brown. It also contains envy and hatred, shown in dark brown, which are two occasional unwholesome chetasikas. Then in light blue, there are seven chetasikas: perception, volition, attention, feeling, life, mental faculty, contact, and one pointedness, which occurs in every chitta, whether good or bad. Then there are energy and sustained application, shown in dark blue, which are two chetasikas that are present in samadhi chittas. At this time, I want to explain why I use two analogies to describe the relationship between chittas and chetasikas. I use the bucket of balls to emphasize that chittas consist of chetasikas. I use the light bulb that flashes and extinguishes with different colors as an analogy to emphasize that chittas appear and disappear one after the other, and their nature, good or bad, keep changing with time. It's the same chitta, but now I'm using the example of the light bulb. In this particular case, this particular chitta is depicted by a light bulb with 52 elements. Only 15 of them have lit up or energized, and they are the 15 Chetasikas I described in the previous slide. So, to summarize, our Chittas contain a subset of 52 Chetasikas. Depending on the Chetasikas in a particular Chitta, championed by some Chetasikas such as volition and hatred, bad Chittas occur in our consciousness. These bad or unwholesome chittas generate bad or unwholesome volitional forces. In a similar way, beautiful or good chittas generate beautiful or good volitional forces. This concludes chapter 82a, which summarizes postulates or basic assumptions of Abhidhamma doctrine that supports the phenomena of Kamma. Next chapter or part 82b will provide more details and present the hypothesis supporting the phenomenon of karma according to how I have understood Abhidhamma.